The stars had always called to humanity. For 300 years, they answered that call. They built ships that could bend space itself. They created colonies on distant worlds. They dreamed of meeting other minds among the endless points of light. Commander Unipark stood at the observation window of the diplomatic vessel Starlight Harmony. Earth hung behind them like a blue jewel, growing smaller with each passing hour. Ahead lay the unknown. Ahead lay first contact with the Galactic Concord, an alliance of 47 alien species that had ruled known space for 10,000 years. Yuna was 43 years old. She had spent 20 years in the United Earth Fleet, climbing from a young pilot to the commander of humanity's most important mission. Her black hair was pulled back tight. Her eyes were steady. She did not allow herself to show fear, even when fear lived in her chest like a cold stone. Admiral Do-Hyun Lee walked up beside her. He was 62, with gray hair and a face marked by decades of hard decisions. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion. He had commanded the defense of the outer colonies against pirates. He trusted very few things in this universe, and alien promises were not among them. "You really believe they want peace?" Do-Hyun asked. His voice was rough, like gravel scraping against stone. "I believe we have to try," Yuna replied. "Humanity cannot grow in isolation. We need allies. We need knowledge. The Concord has both." Do-Hyun grunted. He did not argue further. He had made his objections known many times. The politicians had not listened. They saw opportunity. He saw danger. Time would tell who was right. Dr. Mira Choi joined them at the window. She was 35, small and slight, with gentle eyes that hid a brilliant mind. She had spent 15 years studying alien languages, alien cultures, alien ways of thinking. She believed, with all her heart, that understanding could bridge any gap. "The translation matrices are ready," Myra said. "I have prepared greetings in 17 Concord languages. I have studied their customs, their taboos, their forms of respect. We will not offend them through ignorance." "Let us hope that is enough," Yuna said quietly. The journey to the Concord capital station took 14 days. During that time, humanity sent messages of peace. They shared their art, their music, their history. They showed themselves as they truly were, a young species, eager and curious, reaching out with open hands. The Concord did not respond to any of these messages. When the Starlight Harmony finally arrived at the capital station, Yuna felt her breath catch in her throat. The station was enormous beyond understanding. It stretched across space like a metal flower, each petal large enough to hold 1,000 human cities. Ships moved around it like insects around a hive, ships of designs humanity had never imagined. "Ancestors preserve us," Do-Hyun whispered. It was the first time Yuna had ever heard fear in his voice. The human delegation was escorted to a chamber at the heart of the station. The room was circular, with seats rising in tiers around a central platform. Thousands of aliens watched as Yuna and her companions walked to the center. Thousands of eyes, some with pupils, some without, some glowing with inner light. The Vethri spoke first. They were insectoid beings, their bodies covered in black chitin that gleamed under the harsh lights. Their speaker stood 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and mandibles that clicked when it spoke. The translation device rendered its words in cold, flat tones. "Humans, you have come to join the Concord. We have come to build friendship," Yuna replied. She kept her voice calm. "We offer our hands in peace. We offer our minds in cooperation. We wish only to learn and to share." Silence followed her words. Then, a sound that might have been laughter rippled through the chamber. It was not a pleasant sound. The Moldair representative rose from its seat. It was a silicon-based life form. its body made of shifting crystals that caught the light in fractured rainbows. When it spoke, its voice was like stones grinding together. Humanity has been observed. Humanity has been judged. Your species adapts too quickly. You innovate without permission. You question what should not be questioned. The Concord has ruled for 10,000 years because we understand the danger of unchecked growth. Una felt ice forming in her stomach. We mean no threat. We only wish to silence. The Vetri speaker raised one chitinous arm. The judgment has been rendered. Humanity is classified as a Class 7 threat species. Your expansion ends now. Your technology will be confiscated. Your colonies will be placed under Concord supervision. Resistance will result in extinction. The words fell like hammer blows. Una heard Mira gasp beside her. She heard Do-Yoon curse under his breath. But she forced herself to stand straight, to meet the alien eyes without flinching. You cannot do this, she said. We have committed no crime. We have threatened no one. Your existence is the crime, the Moldar replied. Your potential is the threat. This is not punishment. This is prevention. Guards moved toward the human delegation. They were tall, reptilian beings with scales like armor and weapons that hummed with contained energy. Do-Hyun stepped forward, putting himself between the guards and his companions. Run, he said quietly. Both of you. Get to the shuttle. Get the data core from my quarters. It contains everything I have gathered about the Concord. Use it. I will not leave you, Una said. That is an order, Commander. Do-Hyun pulled a small device from his belt. This is an EMP grenade. Military grade. It will disable everything electronic in this chamber for 30 seconds. That is all the time I can give you. Before Una could protest, Do-Hyun activated the device and threw it. The world dissolved into chaos. Lights flickered and died. Weapons failed. The alien delegates screamed in languages humanity had never heard. Una grabbed Mira's hand and ran. They ran through corridors filled with confusion. They ran past aliens who did not yet understand what was happening. They reached the docking bay where the human shuttle waited, its pilot already preparing for emergency departure. Behind them, Do-Hyun fought. He fought with his fists when his weapons failed. He fought with everything he had, buying seconds with blood and broken bones. And when the guards finally overwhelmed him, he smiled because he knew his people had escaped. The shuttle tore away from the station just as Concord warships began to mobilize. The pilot, a young man named Taiho, pushed the engines beyond their limits. Warning lights screamed. The hull groaned under the stress. Where do we go? Taiho shouted over the alarms. Una clutched Do-Hyun's data core in her hands. She could feel its weight, the weight of secrets, the weight of hope. Away, anywhere. Just get us away. Behind them, through the shuttle's rear cameras, they watched the Concord fleet divide. Half moved to pursue the tiny human vessel. The other half turned toward distant stars, toward the 12 systems where humanity had built their homes. Mira wept silently. She understood what those ships meant. She understood that everything humanity had built was about to burn. We will not let them win, Una said. Her voice was hard now, harder than it had ever been. Do-Hyun gave us this chance. We will not waste it. The shuttle jumped into hyperspace, leaving behind the only life they had ever known. Earth would fall. The colonies would burn. Billions would die. But 3 humans had escaped. 3 humans carried the truth. And in the darkness between stars, they would find a way to fight back. The Concord had tried to crush humanity. They had not yet learned that humans were very difficult to crush. The shuttle drifted through empty space for 17 days. The engines had failed after the 3rd hyperspace jump. Life support was running on backup power. Food was almost gone. Hope was harder to find than either. Una Park sat in the pilot's seat, staring at stars that offered no comfort. Taiho slept in the back, exhausted from his attempts to repair the engines. Mira Choi worked on the data core, her fingers moving across the controls, even as her body weakened from hunger. "I found something," Myra said. Her voice was barely a whisper now. In the Admiral's files, he knew. He knew the Concorde would betray us. Una turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" "He spent years gathering intelligence, secret communications, hidden records, and this." Myra projected a star map into the air. One point glowed brighter than the others. The archive. It is a place the Concorde does not want anyone to find. A storage facility for forbidden knowledge. Technologies they have suppressed for thousands of years. Why would Do-yoon have this? Information? Because he was not just a soldier, Myra replied. He was a spy. He knew humanity would need weapons against the Concorde. He was preparing for a war that everyone else refused to see coming. Una closed her eyes. She thought of Do-yoon, of his rough voice and steady hands. She thought of how he had sacrificed himself without hesitation. He had carried this burden alone for years, never speaking of it, never asking for thanks. "Can we reach this archive?" Una asked. "Not in this shuttle. We need repairs. We need fuel. We need—" Myra stopped speaking. Her eyes went wide. "There is a signal, very faint, coming from that planet." Through the forward window, they could see it now. A rogue planet, drifting between stars without a sun to warm it. Its surface was covered in ice and darkness. No light shone from its face. And yet, something down there was broadcasting. "It could be a trap," Taiho said. He had woken at the sound of their voices. Concorde forces looking for survivors. "It could be salvation," Una replied. "We do not have a choice." "Take us down." The landing was rough. The shuttle's damaged systems could barely handle atmospheric entry. They crashed into a snowfield, the impact throwing all three of them against their restraints. But when the dust settled, they were alive, and they were not alone. Lights appeared in the darkness. Vehicles approached, their headlights cutting through the eternal night of the sunless world. Una reached for her weapon, prepared to fight, prepared to die standing. A voice came through their damaged communication system. It spoke Korean. "Unidentified vessel. This is Captain Ji-hoon Kang of the refugee fleet. Identify yourselves or be destroyed." Una felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them away. Later, there would be time for emotion. Now, there was only survival. "This is Commander Una Park of the United Earth Fleet. We escaped from the Concorde capital station. We carry intelligence vital to humanity's survival." Silence followed. Then, the vehicles surrounded the crashed shuttle, their weapons pointed at the hull. The airlock opened, and armed figures in cold-weather gear entered the ship. They moved with professional efficiency, checking every corner, every shadow. A man stepped forward. He was in his 40s, with a square jaw and eyes that had seen too much death. He looked at Una, at Myra, at Taiho. Then he lowered his weapon. "Commander Park," he said, "I am Ji-hoon Kang. Welcome to Noctis. Welcome to what remains of humanity." They were taken to an underground city carved from the frozen rock. Nearly 50,000 humans lived there, survivors from dozens of ships that had fled the Concorde attack. Some were military personnel. Some were scientists. Many were ordinary people who had simply been lucky enough to escape. The city was cold and dark, lit by emergency lights that never stopped flickering. Food was rationed strictly. Water was recycled again and again. But the people were alive. The people were fighting. Ji-hoon Kang had been a cargo ship captain before the attack. He had been hauling supplies between colonies when the Concorde fleet arrived. He had gathered other survivors, led them to this dead world that no one wanted, and built a community from nothing. "We have been here for 3 months," Ji-hoon explained as he led them through the underground corridors. "We have 47 ships, most of them damaged. We have weapons, but not enough. We have people willing to fight, but nowhere to fight from." "We may have found something that can change that," Yuna said. She told him about the archive, about Do-hyun's intelligence, about the secrets the Concorde was hiding. Ji-hoon listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Even if this archive exists, even if we could reach it, we are still only 50,000 people against a galactic empire. The numbers are impossible." "The numbers have always been impossible for humanity," Yuna replied. "We have never let that stop us before." They met with the other leaders of the refugee community. There was Dr. Hyun-soo Kim, an elderly scientist who had specialized in theoretical physics before the war. There was Lieutenant Soo-jin Han, who commanded the small military force that protected the settlement. And there was Specialist Yoon-ji Beek, a young engineer who had become famous among the survivors for her ability to make broken technology work again. Yoon-ji was only 26 years old. She had graduated at the top of her class from the Seoul Institute of Technology. She had been working on an orbital station when the attack came, and she had managed to escape by rebuilding a destroyed shuttle from spare parts in less than 4 hours. Now she looked at Do-hyun's data core with hungry eyes. "The encryption is unlike anything I have ever seen," Yoon-ji said, her fingers dancing over the holographic interface. "It uses quantum state locks, self-modifying algorithms. It could take years to crack." "We do not have years," Ji-hoon said. "No," Yoon-ji agreed. "But we might not need to crack it. Look at this." She expanded a section of the data. "The archive is not just a storage facility. It is alive. Some kind of artificial intelligence guards it. If we could communicate with it, if we could convince it to trust us." Myra Choi stepped forward. "That is what I do. I build bridges between minds that do not understand each other. If this intelligence can be reasoned with, I can reach it. But first we need allies," Yuna said. "We need ships. We need technology. We need species who hate the Concorde as much as we do." "There are no such species," Lieutenant Soo-jin said. "The Concorde controls everything." "Everything we know about," Myra replied. "But Do-hyun's files mention others. Species that the Concorde suppressed long ago. Species that were scattered and forgotten. They might still exist in the margins, in the places the Concorde does not watch." "You want to send a message into the unknown," Ji-hoon said. "You want to reveal our location to anyone who might be listening." "Yes," Yuna said. "It is a risk. It might bring the Concorde down on us. It might bring something worse. But if we hide here in the darkness forever, we are already dead. We just have not stopped breathing yet." The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for caution, for hiding, for waiting until they were stronger. Others argued that strength would never come if they did not take risks. Voices rose in anger. Old fears clashed with desperate hopes. In the end, Ji-hoon Kang made the decision. He stood at the center of the council chamber, looking at the faces of his people, the last remnants of a species that had once dreamed of touching the stars. "We will send the message," he said. "We will reach out into the void. And we will pray that something friendly answers." Yoon-ji Beek built the transmitter from salvaged parts. Myra Choi wrote the message, a greeting that spoke of loss and hope, of persecution and defiance. Yuna Park recorded her voice, calm and clear, offering friendship to anyone who had suffered under the Concorde's rule. They broadcast the message on frequencies the Concorde did not monitor, frequencies that had been silent for millennia. Then they waited. For 43 days, nothing happened. The people of Noctis went about their lives, working, hoping, trying, not to think about the death that waited for them in the stars. On the 44th day, something answered. The response came in a language no human had ever heard, from a corner of the galaxy no human had ever visited. Myra worked for 18 hours to translate it, her eyes red from exhaustion, her hands shaking from coffee and fear. When she finally understood the message, she wept. "They call themselves the Shanri," she said. "They were once the greatest engineers in the galaxy. The Concord destroyed their civilization 3,000 years ago, but they remember. They remember, and they are willing to help us fight." Hope had answered. Now it was time to turn hope into war. The Shanri ship arrived at Noctis 3 months after first contact. It was unlike any vessel humanity had ever seen. It moved like a living thing, its hull shifting and flowing as if made from liquid metal. Bioluminescent patterns danced across its surface, speaking a language of light that Mira Choi was only beginning to understand. Unipark stood at the landing zone with 50 armed guards. She did not know if this meeting would bring salvation or destruction. She did not know if the Shanri could be trusted, but she knew that hiding was no longer an option. The ship opened like a flower blooming in reverse. Water poured out, forming a pathway across the frozen ground. And through that pathway swam Elder Luminara. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Her body was long and serpentine, covered in scales that glowed with inner light. Her face had features that were almost human, large eyes and a mouth that could form expressions. But everything else about her was utterly alien. She floated in a sphere of water that her technology maintained around her, allowing her to exist in the frozen air of Noctis. "I am Luminara," she said. The translation device rendered her words in a voice like singing crystal. "I have swum the dark currents between stars for 3,000 years. I have watched your species from afar. I have hoped that you would be the ones to finally challenge the Concord." Eunice stepped forward. "Why us? Why humanity?" "Because you ask why." Luminara's lights flickered in what might have been amusement. "Every other species we have encountered accepted the Concord's rules without question. They believed what they were told. They forgot how to imagine anything different. But humans question everything. Humans look at impossible walls and ask how to climb them. The Alliance was formed that day. Luminara brought with her knowledge that the Concord had tried to erase from history. She brought blueprints for technologies that humans had never dreamed of. She brought connections to other forgotten species hiding in the dark corners of the galaxy. Over the following months, ships arrived from places no human map had ever shown. The Kiyomari came in vessels that were actually living organisms, creatures the size of mountains that had been bred for interstellar travel. They were gas giant dwellers, beings of swirling chemistry who communicated through changes in their atmospheric pressure. They had been enslaved by the Concord for 6,000 years, forced to produce rare gases in their massive bodies for the elder species to harvest. The TIF came in geometric shapes that hurt the eyes to look at. They were crystalline beings, structures of pure mineral that somehow thought and felt and dreamed. The Concord had shattered their homeworld to harvest their reproductive crystals. Now only a few thousand remained, refugees from a genocide that no one remembered. Each species brought something unique. The Shanri brought their understanding of biotechnology, the ability to grow machines that healed themselves. The Kumari brought their knowledge of spatial manipulation, techniques for bending space that were far more advanced than anything the Concord allowed. The TIF brought computational power, their crystalline minds capable of calculations that would take human computers centuries. Yoonji Beek worked with all of them. She slept only 3 hours a night, spending every other moment learning, adapting, creating. Her workshop became a place where the technologies of 4 species came together in ways that had never been attempted before. The Concord keeps species separate for a reason, she explained to Yuna one night. Her eyes were bright with exhaustion and excitement. They are afraid of what happens when different minds work together. Look at this. She held up a small device that fit in her palm. This is a communication system. Shanri Biotech, Kiyomari Spatial Folding, TIFF Crystal Processing, and Human Interface Design. It can send messages instantly across any distance. Instantly. No delay. The Concorde told everyone this was impossible. Why would they lie about something like that? Yuna asked. Because instant communication breaks their power structure. Yunji set the device down. The Concorde rules through control. They control information, technology, movement. If species could talk to each other freely, if they could share ideas without permission, the Concorde would collapse. Their empire is built on keeping everyone separate and afraid. Myra Choi made a similar discovery in her work with the archive. With Luminara's help, she had finally established contact with the ancient artificial intelligence that guarded humanity's forbidden knowledge. The AI was called the Keeper, and it had been waiting for someone to ask it questions for 8,000 years. The Keeper does not think like a human or any biological mind, Myra explained to the council. It does not have desires or fears or hopes. It simply exists to preserve knowledge. When the Concorde took control, they ordered it to lock away certain information. But they never told it to refuse questions. They never imagined anyone would ask, "What did you learn?" Ji-hoon asked. "Everything." Mira took a deep breath. The Concorde is not just suppressing technology. They are suppressing history. There were once thousands of intelligent species in this galaxy. Thousands. The Concorde reduced that number to 47. Every species that showed too much potential, every species that asked too many questions, was either destroyed or crippled. The council fell silent. Even Luminara, who had lived for 3 millennia, seemed shocked by this revelation. Humanity was not the first to be classified as a threat, Myra continued. We were not even the 100th. The Concorde has been doing this for 10,000 years. They call it protection. They call it order. But it is genocide, repeated over and over, until only the obedient remain. Yuna stood up. She had aged in the past year. Her black hair now showed streaks of gray. Her eyes carried the weight of every life lost when Earth burned. But her voice remained strong. "This cannot continue," she said. "We did not survive to hide. We did not build this alliance to wait for death. The Concorde believes they have won. They believe humanity is broken. They are wrong. What do you propose?" Luminara asked. "We attack their lies." Yuna walked to the center of the council chamber. The Concorde's power comes from controlling information. They tell species what is possible and what is impossible. They tell them what to believe. We are going to break that control. We are going to show every species in the galaxy the truth. How? Ji-hoon demanded. We have a few thousand ships against their millions. We cannot fight them directly. We do not need to fight their ships. We need to fight their story. Yuna looked at Yunji. You said you can build a device for instant communication. Can you build something larger? Something that can broadcast to the entire galaxy at once? Yunji's eyes widened. In theory, yes. If we could access the Concorde's central communications hub, we could hijack their network. Every species, every world, every ship would receive whatever message we sent. Then that is our target. Yuna turned back to the council. We are not going to defeat the Concorde with weapons. We are going to defeat them with words. We are going to share the truth about what they have done. We are going to share the technologies they have hidden. We are going to show the galaxy that the rules can be changed. The debate was fierce. Many argued it was suicide. The communications hub was the most heavily defended structure in the galaxy. Even reaching it would cost countless lives. And even if they succeeded, there was no guarantee that anyone would listen. But in the end, hope won over fear. The Alliance voted to move forward. They would attack the Concord's central hub. They would broadcast the truth. And they would accept whatever consequences followed. Luminara spoke last, her lights painting words that the translator struggled to render into human language. For 3,000 years, I have dreamed of this moment. I have dreamed of a species brave enough to do what mine was too afraid to attempt. Humanity is young. Humanity is small. But humanity has something the Concord forgot long ago. The courage to imagine a different future. She turned to Yuna, her alien eyes meeting human ones. My people will fight beside you. We will die beside you if necessary. Because some things are worth dying for. Freedom is worth dying for. Truth is worth dying for. And the chance to rewrite the rules of the galaxy is worth everything we have. The preparations began. Ships were repaired. Weapons were built. Soldiers trained for a battle that most of them would not survive. And in the darkness of Noctis, in the frozen heart of a sunless world, hope burned brighter than any star. They were going to war. Not for revenge. Not for conquest. But for the right to exist, to grow, to ask questions that the Concord did not want answered. They were going to change everything. The fleet gathered in the shadow of a dying star. 312 ships from 4 species, carrying 57,000 souls who had volunteered to die for a chance at freedom. It was the largest force the Alliance had ever assembled. Against the Concord's millions of warships, it was nothing. Against the weight of 10,000 years of empire, it was less than a whisper. Unipark stood on the bridge of the flagship. A vessel that had once been a Shanri exploration craft, but now carried weapons from every species in the Alliance. She looked at the faces around her. Human and Shanri and Kiyomari, working together in ways the Concord had spent millennia preventing. This is Commander Park to all ships, she said into the communication system. You know what we face today. You know the odds. Many of us will not return from this mission. But what we do today will echo through the ages. What we do today will break chains that have bound the galaxy for 10,000 years. She paused, gathering her thoughts. In the silence, she could hear the hum of the engines, the quiet breathing of her crew. We are not fighting for victory in any traditional sense. We are fighting for truth. We are fighting for the right to ask questions. We are fighting for every species that the Concord crushed because they dared to be different. She straightened her shoulders. Today, we rewrite the rules. Today, we show the galaxy that the impossible is just something nobody has tried yet. The fleet jumped into hyperspace. The plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Captain Ji-Hoon Kang would lead the main assault force against the communications hub itself. Admiral Do-Young Lee, somehow still alive after months in a Concord prison, would command a diversionary attack on 3 border stations. He had been rescued in a mission that cost 80 lives, and he had immediately volunteered for the most dangerous part of the operation. Yuna had tried to talk him out of it. He was 67 years old. He had survived torture and imprisonment. He had given enough. I started this fight, Do-Yoon had said, his voice still rough from the damage the Concord interrogators had done to his throat. I will see it through. Let me do this, Yuna. Let me give our people a chance. She had agreed because she understood. Some debts could only be paid in blood. The diversionary fleet arrived first, dropping out of hyperspace directly above the Vethri homeworld. The insectoid species screamed in fury as 300 alien ships appeared in their sacred sky. They scrambled their defenses, calling for reinforcements from every nearby system. Do-Young Lee sat in his command chair, watching the Concord ships swarm toward his position. He smiled, though it hurt his damaged face to do so. All ships, weapons free, he ordered. Make them remember us. The battle was chaos. Human ships fired weapons designed by Shanri engineers. Kiyomari living vessels released clouds of corrosive gas that ate through Concorde hulls. Tith crystalline fighters moved with impossible speed, their geometric forms twisting through space in ways that defied physics, and the Concorde fought back. Their neural disruptors tore through ship after ship, turning crews against each other in moments of horrible confusion. Their planet crackers fired beams of pure destruction that vaporized anything they touched. Their numbers seemed endless, wave after wave of ships rising to crush the attackers. Do-Hyun's flagship took a direct hit from a Molder's siege weapon. The bridge decompressed. Half his crew died in seconds. He sealed his helmet and kept fighting, directing his remaining ships through the destruction. "Admiral, we cannot hold much longer," his first officer shouted through the static-filled communication channel. "We do not need to hold forever," Do-Hyun replied. "We just need to hold long enough. Keep them looking at us. Keep them afraid." At the communications hub, Ji-Hoon Kang led his strike force through the outer defenses. The hub was protected by 3 rings of weapons platforms, each one capable of destroying a dozen ships. But Yoonji-beak had found a weakness in the Concorde's design. The platforms communicated with each other through a central control signal. If that signal could be disrupted, even for a few seconds, the platforms would lose their coordination. "Specialist Beak, are you ready?" Ji-Hoon asked. "As ready as I can be," Yoonji replied. She sat in a small craft attached to the flagship's hull, surrounded by equipment that blended Shanri biotech with human engineering. "When we reach the inner ring, give me 30 seconds. I can crack their control signal and give you a window." 30 seconds, understood. Ji-Hoon turned to his crew. "All hands, prepare for assault run. This is what we came here for. This is what we trained for. Do not think about surviving. Think about succeeding." The strike force plunged through the outer defenses. Ships died all around them, torn apart by weapons fire or smashed by collisions with debris. Ji-Hoon watched his tactical display turn red as vessel after vessel disappeared from the board. 100 ships became 50. 50 became 20. "We are at the inner ring," the pilot reported. "Specialist Beak, it is now or never." Yoonji closed her eyes and connected her mind to the hybrid system she had built. The technology responded to her thoughts, reaching out across the void to touch the Concorde's control network. She felt the alien code like a wall of thorns, each layer protected by thousands of years of security. 17 minutes. That was how long Concorde experts said it would take to breach their security. Yoonji did it in 17 seconds. The weapons platforms froze. For one precious moment, the path to the communications hub was clear. "Go!" Ji-Hoon screamed. "Go now!" The surviving ships surged forward. They reached the hub's docking ports and attached themselves to the structure. Assault teams poured out, fighting through corridors filled with Concorde defenders. Myra Choi led the communications team, protected by soldiers who fell one by one to clear her path. She reached the broadcast center. It was a chamber larger than any space she had ever seen, filled with equipment that connected to every corner of the galaxy. A single transmission from here could reach trillions of minds. "I need 5 minutes," Myra said. "Hold them that long." The soldiers formed a line at the entrance to the chamber. Concorde forces threw themselves against that line again and again. Bodies fell on both sides. The floor became slippery with blood of a dozen different colors. Mira worked. Her fingers flew across controls that had never been designed for human hands. Yoonji's voice guided her through the alien systems, explaining what each function did, how each connection worked. Shanri biotech interfaces translated her thoughts into commands the Concorde machines could understand. "Connection established," Myra said. "Broadcasting, now." Across the galaxy, screens flickered. Communications devices activated without being touched. Every species, every world, every ship received the same signal at the same instant. Myra's face appeared, human and small and unremarkable. Behind her, the sounds of battle raged. But her voice was calm. Citizens of the Concord. My name is Mira Choi. I am a human. I am a member of a species you were told no longer exists. I am speaking to you today because you have been lied to. She paused, and in that pause, she transmitted the data. Centuries of suppressed knowledge. Technologies that the Concord had forbidden. Histories that had been erased. Evidence of every genocide, every suppression, every crime the elder species had committed to maintain their power. The Concord has told you that certain things are impossible. They have told you that certain questions should not be asked. They have told you that obedience is safety and curiosity is death. Myra's eyes were bright with tears, but her voice did not waver. They lied. Everything they told you was a lie. We are sending you the truth. The technologies they said were impossible. The histories they said did not exist. The knowledge they tried to destroy. It is all here, free, for anyone who wants to learn. She smiled, a small and sad expression. We are humanity. We are not your rulers. We are not your enemies. We are just the ones foolish enough to ask why. The ones stubborn enough to keep fighting when we should have surrendered. The ones hopeful enough to believe that the rules could be changed. The Concord tried to crush us. Instead, they made us stronger. They made us angry. They made us understand that some things are worth dying for. The broadcast continued for 12 minutes. By the time Concord forces finally broke through the defenders and reached the chamber, Mira had finished. She stood waiting for them, unarmed, still smiling. They did not kill her. They did not know what to do with her. The galaxy was already screaming, billions of voices raised in confusion and anger and hope. The lie was broken. The truth was spreading. And nothing the Concord did could stop it now. At the diversionary battle, Admiral Doing Lee received the broadcast with the rest of the galaxy. He watched Myra's face on his damaged screen. He listened to her words. And when the transmission ended, he laughed, a sound that echoed through his dying ship. We did it then, he said to no one, to everyone, to the ghost of humanity that had placed its hope in him. We actually did it. His flagship took another hit. The engines died. The hull began to break apart around him. But Doing Lee died smiling, because he knew that his sacrifice had meant something. The battle ended with humanity's forces shattered. 90% of the ships that had joined the attack were destroyed. Tens of thousands had died. But across the galaxy, revolutions were beginning. Species that had obeyed for millennia were suddenly asking questions. Technologies that had been forbidden were suddenly being built. The Concord had lost control of the truth. And without truth, their power was nothing but empty threats. Humanity had not won the war, but they had ensured that the war could finally be fought. 5 years had passed since the broadcast that shattered the Concord's lies. 5 years of chaos and change, of empires falling and new alliances rising. 5 years of pain and healing, of destruction and rebuilding. Unipark stood on a balcony overlooking the city of New Seoul. It had been built on the bones of the old Seoul, which had burned when the Concord first attacked Earth. But the new city was different. Human towers stood beside Shanri water gardens. Tith crystal structures grew alongside human parks. Streets were designed for beings who walked, who swam, who floated, who moved in ways that humans had never imagined before. This was what they had fought for. This mixing of minds and cultures. This beautiful chaos of different species living and working together. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. She turned to find Ji-Hoon Kang standing in formal military dress, looking deeply, uncomfortable. "The ceremony starts in 1 hour," Ji-hoon said. "The delegates are gathering." Yuna nodded. "How many species sent representatives?" 117. More than half the galaxy. Ji-hoon shook his head slowly. "I still cannot believe it sometimes. When we started, we were 50,000 refugees hiding on a dead world. Now we are hosting the founding of a new galactic order." "Do-hyun would have hated this," Yuna said quietly. "All the politics. All the speeches. He would have hated being here," Ji-hoon agreed. "But he would have loved knowing that his sacrifice meant something." They walked together through the streets of New Seoul. Citizens of a dozen species passed them, going about their daily lives. A Kyomari child floated beside a human girl, both laughing at something Yuna could not hear. A Vethri merchant argued prices with a Shanri customer, their translated voices rising and falling in the eternal rhythm of commerce. Not all of Vethri had chosen to fight against change. Some had embraced it, seeing in humanity's revolution a chance to escape the rigid hierarchies that had controlled their own species for millennia. The same was true for many Concord species. The old rulers had tried to present the conflict as humans against everyone else. They had failed. The truth was too powerful, too clear. This was not about species. This was about freedom versus control. The ceremony was held in a building that had once been a stadium. Now it served as the temporary home of the Open Concord, the new alliance that was replacing the old order. Representatives from dozens of worlds filled the seats, a rainbow of forms and faces that would have been unthinkable just a decade ago. Elder Luminara swam to the central platform in her sphere of water. She was older now, her lights dimmer than they had been when she first arrived at Noctis. But her voice was still strong. 10,000 years ago, my ancestors built wonders that changed the galaxy. For that crime, we were punished. Our world was taken. Our people were scattered. Our knowledge was erased from history. Her lights flickered in patterns of deep emotion. We waited 3,000 years for someone to remember us. Someone to tell the galaxy that we had existed. Someone to prove that the past did not have to define the future. She turned, and her alien eyes found Yuna in the crowd. Humanity answered that call. Not because they were the strongest or the wisest, but because they refused to accept that the rules could not be changed. Because they asked questions that everyone else had forgotten how to ask. Specialist Yoonji Beek sat in the technical section, surrounded by engineers from 6 different species. She was 31 now, with gray streaks in her hair that had not been there 5 years ago. She had rebuilt more technology in those years than most engineers accomplished in a lifetime. Her hybrid designs were spreading across the galaxy, bringing together the knowledge of species that had been kept apart for millennia. She barely paid attention to the speeches. Her mind was already working on her next project, a method for healing worlds that had been damaged by Concord weapons. Earth was mostly recovered now, but dozens of other planets still bore scars that would take generations to fade. Dr. Mira Choi sat in the audience section, anonymous among the crowd. She had declined all official positions, all titles, all honors. She said she was just a translator, that she had only done what any linguist would do when given the chance to speak to the galaxy. But sometimes, late at night, she allowed herself to remember those 12 minutes in the broadcast chamber. The feeling of speaking to trillions of minds at once. The weight of truth passing through her voice. The hope that maybe, just maybe, words could change the universe. When it was her turn to speak, Ambassador Yuna Park walked slowly to the platform. She was 50 now. Her hair was more gray than black. Her face showed the marks of years and grief and hard decisions. But her eyes were still the eyes of the young commander who had refused to surrender when the Concord declared humanity a threat. 5 years ago, we were told that our species had no future, she began. We were told that our curiosity was a crime. Our innovation was a danger. Our questions were forbidden. She paused, looking out at the assembly of species, the collection of minds that had come together to build something new. The old Concord believed that order required obedience. That peace required silence. That safety required keeping everyone separate and afraid. Her voice hardened. They were wrong. The galaxy was never safe under their rule. It was just quiet. The silence of species too afraid to speak. The peace of minds too broken to dream. We lost much in the fight against that silence. We lost billions of lives. We lost worlds that had existed for millennia. We lost friends and family and futures that will never be born. Her eyes found the place where Admiral Do-Yoon Lee would have sat if he had survived. The empty chair that would always be waiting for him. But we gained something too. We gained the truth. We gained the freedom to question. We gained the right to imagine a different future and work together to build it. She straightened her shoulders, and her voice filled the chamber. The old Concord had one rule: obey. We proposed different rules for this new alliance. Not obedience, but cooperation. Not silence, but conversation. Not fear, but hope. She looked at Luminara, at the Kiyomari representative, at the Tith crystals that had come to witness this moment. We are not here to lead you. Humanity is not the ruler of this new age. We are not the wisest or the strongest or the most advanced. We are simply the ones who refuse to accept that the rules could not be changed. The rules can always be changed. Let us write better ones, together. The vote was unanimous. The Open Concord was established, built on principles of cooperation and shared knowledge, of questions freely asked and freely answered. It would not be perfect. There would be conflicts and failures and moments when the old ways seemed easier than the new. Change was hard. Freedom was messy. The future was uncertain. But for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was free to find out what came next. After the ceremony, Yuna walked alone through the gardens that surrounded the assembly building. The sun was setting over New Seoul, painting the sky in colors that no artist could capture. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the friends she had lost, the enemies she had made, the impossible things she had done because giving up was never an option. A small hand slipped into hers. She looked down to find a human child, no more than 6 years old, staring up at her with wide eyes. "Are you the lady who talked to everyone?" the child asked. Yuna smiled. "I suppose I am. My teacher says you saved the galaxy." "No." Yuna knelt down to look the child in the eyes. "We changed the galaxy. That is different. Saving implies that the work is finished. But change never stops. It keeps going, forever, as long as there are people willing to ask why things are the way they are. Why are things the way they are?" the child asked with the perfect innocence of youth. Yuna laughed, a sound that surprised even herself. "That is the best question anyone can ask. Keep asking it. Never stop asking it. Because as long as people keep asking that question, the galaxy has a chance to keep getting better." She stood and watched the child run back to her parents, already chattering about the conversation. In that small moment, Yuna saw everything they had fought for. Not just survival, but growth. Not just freedom, but hope. The Concord had tried to crush humanity. They had failed. Instead, humanity had rewritten the rules. And the new story was just beginning.